I used to believe the worst betrayals in life came with a thunderclap. Something loud, explosive, violent. But no, mine started with a laugh. It was subtle, silky, almost hypnotic. It danced across the ballroom at the Radcliffe Hotel, winding its way through the clinking glasses and low jazz like a trail of perfume. I turned just in time to see her, Alana, my wife of 11 years, tilting her head back as she laughed a little too closely with a man in a tailored navy suit. Her hand rested lightly on his forearm. It lingered. We were at her company's annual gala. Black tie, absurdly expensive. Everyone from interns to C-suite was here. I was nursing a bourbon by the corner bar, I skimming the room out of habit, but hers drew me in like a magnetic field. There was something in the way her body leaned into him, just enough to communicate intimacy, not enough to spark scandal. I knew that body. I had kissed every inch of it. I had pulled her into me on cold winter mornings and felt her breath melt across my chest. And I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that what I was seeing wasn't harmless. It was foreplay. The man was Ethan Caldwell, her boss. Younger than me by at least 5 years, probably gym fit, with a jaw that had been chiseled by nepotism and protein shakes. I'd met him once. Smiled. Shook his hand. He looked through me like I wasn't even real. And now here he was, whispering into my wife's ear. I watched her laugh again, saw the soft touch of her fingers drift up to brush a strand of hair behind her ear, the same motion she made when we first started dating, the same motion that once made me fall in love. I didn't go over to them, didn't interrupt. That would have been too easy. Instead, I retreated into the shadows of the ballroom. I let the ice melt in my glass and let my thoughts do what they always did when I sensed something wrong. Calculate. Alana had changed recently. More time at the office. A sudden obsession with spin classes. Her phone now never left her side, and when I asked who she was texting, the answers were vague. Generic. Just work stuff. Just Sarah from HR. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But you don't marry a woman like Alana and not learn the details, how she bites the inside of her cheek when she's lying, how she never finishes her wine when she's nervous. That night, she drank half the glass. Exactly half. The rest of the evening blurred by in small talk and polite nods. I smiled when I had to, laughed at jokes I didn't hear. The entire time, I watched them. Alana and Ethan. Moving apart and back together again in a rhythm too intimate to ignore. Like a dance no one else had been invited to. When she finally returned to my side, she kissed my cheek with soft lips and empty eyes. Sorry, Ethan was introducing me to a few board members, she said, brushing invisible lint off her dress. It was red. Tight. The kind of dress that clung and whispered instead of screamed. You looked like you were having fun, I replied. She paused. Just for a second. Then smiled. Just work? That night, lying beside her in bed, I listened to the sound of her breath, steady and even. I watched the way the moonlight touched her face. My fingers hovered over her hip, just inches away from where they used to rest without thinking. She shifted slightly, and my hand fell away. I turned onto my back and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere, deep in the architecture of our marriage, something had shifted. A hairline fracture I'd felt under my feet. I hadn't seen the cracks until tonight, but now I couldn't unsee them. The problem with suspicion is that it doesn't shout. It whispers. And tonight, I heard it loud and clear. It started with the smartwatch. 2 nights after the gala, Alana left it on the kitchen counter to charge. She was in the shower, humming softly behind the closed bathroom door, the scent of her new citrus shampoo wafting down the hall. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the little black screen as it buzzed once. A text. I wasn't the kind of man who checked his wife's messages. But then again, I also wasn't the kind of man whose wife whispered with her boss at a company party and came home with her lipstick smudged and a new excuse. My fingers hovered, then tapped. Ethan, next time, I want to taste you without the dress in the way. I stood motionless. The buzzing in my ears rose above the sound of the shower. Another text arrived, and this one hit me harder. Ethan, thinking about that little noise you made when I pulled your hair. Fuck, Alana. The bile rose in my throat, fast and bitter. I put the watch down. Not flung, not dropped, placed. Slowly, deliberately, like it might explode. I didn't storm into the bathroom. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked to my office, shut the door, and opened my laptop. The thing about suspicion is that once it starts gnawing at you, it never stops until it's fed. And I was starving for answers. I went methodically. Her phone was locked, but her MacBook synced to the cloud, and she wasn't as careful with that. I opened the iMessage app. Nothing. She deleted it all smart. Smarter than I expected. But I was smarter too. I pulled up iCloud, entered her Apple ID, something I'd helped her set up years ago, and reset the password using her recovery email. She never changed her recovery questions. What was the name of your first pet? Bandit. Where did you meet your spouse? Barcelona. The answers came easily, almost mockingly. And there it was. The trail. Deleted photos that weren't completely deleted. GPS pings from the fancy restaurant downtown on a night she said she was working late. A rideshare receipt emailed to her from a trip to Ethan's building. Midday. Thursday. The texts were more careful. She deleted them both from her phone and laptop, but she hadn't unlinked her iPad from their shared iCloud. I found the backup. I restored it. And suddenly, I was swimming in every filthy word he'd sent her. Ethan, that little black thing. You wore that for me, didn't you? Alana, of course I did. I didn't even want to take it off. Wanted you to rip it. Ethan, next time, let me fuck you in your office. Alana, you'll have to be quiet. Unless you want someone to hear me. I read every message. Every emoji. Every picture. Some of them made me sick. Some made my stomach knot with a strange, unwanted jealousy. She'd never talked to me like that. Never sent me those kinds of pictures. Her eyes, wild. Her lips parted. Her legs in poses I'd only seen in fantasies. Fantasies she apparently saved for her boss. I kept reading. Documenting. I took screenshots. Saved the messages. Created a folder on an encrypted drive titled Truth. I told myself it was for legal protection, for proof in case things got ugly. But really, I just couldn't let myself forget. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work. I smiled when I had to. I watched her kiss me on the cheek in the mornings and wondered how many times she'd kissed him with that same mouth before coming home. She became more careful. She stopped leaving her watch out. She guarded her phone like it was a bomb. But the damage was already done. The architecture of our life had collapsed, and I was the only one who noticed the rubble under our feet. Then one night, after she'd fallen asleep, her phone buzzed beside her on the nightstand. I waited, then reached. Face ID. Locked, but I'd seen her code. I was sure of it. My heart pounded as I entered the 6 digits. It opened. I scrolled through her texts. She was smarter now, no Ethan in her recent messages. But I checked her photo album, the recently deleted folder. And there it was. A selfie she'd sent him just 3 days ago. She was in our bed. Our sheets. Wearing only his tie. Her caption had said, "Thought you'd want a little preview for tomorrow." I looked over at her. She was breathing softly, peacefully. And I knew, this wasn't just sex. It wasn't just a mistake. She wanted him. And I wanted revenge. The first time I saw Isabel Caldwell, she was wearing white gloves and holding a tulip-colored coffee cup with both hands, like she needed the warmth to protect her from the world. It was a cold Wednesday morning, crisp and gray, and I was sitting at a quiet cafe in Gramercy Park pretending to scroll my phone while watching the entrance. I'd already done my homework. Ethan's wife was surprisingly low profile for a woman married to a man like him. No tabloid headlines. No Instagram thirst traps. Just a handful of society gala photos and a charity board listing for pediatric cancer research. But there was something in her eyes in those photos, sharp, intelligent, and just barely veiled sadness. I knew that look, because I wore it too. I timed everything carefully. I knew her Pilates schedule, knew the dog walking route she took, knew which coffee shop she stopped at on Wednesdays. I made sure I bumped into her just after she'd ordered. Not too early, not too late. Timing mattered. If she was going to believe this wasn't premeditated, the moment had to feel like fate. She stepped toward the counter, her tall frame wrapped in a beige wool coat, her dark hair pinned loosely beneath a cashmere beret. She looked like the kind of woman who never cracked in public. I approached casually, like I was just another stranger waiting for a cappuccino. "Excuse me," I said as she passed. "Isabel Caldwell?" She paused, blinking. "Yes." I hesitated, like I hadn't rehearsed this line a dozen times. "I don't think we've met, but we should talk. About Ethan. And my wife." Her expression didn't change. Not right away. There was a flicker, something behind her eyes tightening like a wire. But her voice stayed smooth. "I'm sorry," she said. I held up my phone. The screen displayed a blurred photo. My wife's back, unmistakable in a red lace dress. Ethan's hand on her waist. Too familiar. Too real. "I know this is a lot," I said quietly. "But I'm not here to cause drama. I just thought you deserved to know." She stared at the screen, her lips parting slightly. For a moment I thought she might drop her coffee. But then she straightened her shoulders. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the small table by the window. We sat across from each other like we were on a first date from hell. I'm sorry, I said. I should have introduced myself. I know who you are, she interrupted. You're Alana's husband. That stopped me cold. You knew? I suspected, she said, sipping her drink like it was nothing. You're not the first man Ethan's done this to. But this time, it felt different. He stopped coming home early. He started lying, badly. Ethan lies with polish when it's business. But when it's personal, he gets sloppy. I nodded slowly, letting the words settle. You don't seem shocked, I said. I've had years to practice my expression. Something about the way she said it, soft, but bitter, hit me harder than the photo on my screen. I'm sorry, I said again. Isabel studied me for a moment. Do you want to hurt them? The question was so direct, so surgical, it nearly made me laugh. I want them to know how it feels, I admitted. To be humiliated, lied to, replaced. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. Then let's burn them both. I blinked. Excuse me. Isabel's smile didn't reach her eyes. You think I've never imagined revenge? I've just never had the right partner. You're serious. I'm done playing the graceful, betrayed wife, she said. And from the look in your eyes, so are you. We sat in silence for a few beats, the cafe noise filling the space between us. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small leather notebook, and opened to a page with a date circled in black ink. The gala, she said. It's 2 weeks away. Ethan's been obsessing about it for months. New investors, international press. He'll be there. So will Alana. And so will we, I said, my voice low. She smiled. That night, we show them what it feels like to lose the narrative. To be exposed. My mind raced with possibilities. But one thought kept bubbling up through the adrenaline. Why are you doing this? I asked. You don't know me. You could have walked away. Isabel looked me dead in the eyes. Because I'm tired of being quiet. And because you're the first person who actually asked. I left the cafe that morning with more than proof. I left with a plan. The invitation came on heavy cardstock, embossed in gold and wrapped in a velvet ribbon. It was obnoxious, really. The kind of invitation that screamed, look how important we are. But that's exactly what Ethan lived for, appearances. Everything in his world had to be curated, celebrated, and polished until it glistened under the lights of some rooftop venue filled with champagne and mutual deceit. Alana's voice was light as she handed me the envelope that evening, like it meant nothing. Company gala's on the 23rd, she said, without looking up from her laptop. Black tie. You don't have to come if you're busy. I took the envelope and turned it in my hand. Of course I'll come, I said calmly. Wouldn't miss it. She hesitated, just a flicker, but it was there. Guilt? Suspicion? Or the sinking dread that her two worlds were about to collide? Either way, she said nothing. Later that night, I texted Isabel. Got the invite. She's trying to keep me away. That means it's the perfect night to blow it up. Isabel, good. Let's make it unforgettable. What followed was a week of planning that felt more like preparing for a heist than a social function. Every detail mattered. Timing, clothing, entrance, exit. The goal wasn't to cause a scene. It was to devastate them with elegance. Isabel suggested we meet to plan in person, and I found myself agreeing before I could think too hard about why I was so eager. We met at her place this time. A penthouse suite overlooking the park, decorated with a tasteful blend of minimalist art and quiet grief. There were no photos of Ethan, no wedding frames, just shadows and clean lines. She poured us wine, something French and complicated, and sat across from me in a silk blouse that caught the light like liquid. We need to be more than just coordinated, she said. We need to look intimate. A team, one they never saw coming. I nodded, watching the way her fingers danced around the rim of her glass. I was thinking the same. I'll rent a tux that matches whatever you wear. She arched a brow, assuming you'll get to see it in advance. I smirked. You planning a reveal? Her lips curled. Let's just say I want to make sure Ethan's eyes linger long enough for his wife to notice. And I want Alana to feel a spark of doubt. Like maybe she miscalculated. There was a pause. The kind of pause that hung heavy between two people who knew they were playing with fire. You're enjoying this, I said. Not enjoying, she replied softly. Savoring. I leaned back in my chair, letting the wine settle on my tongue. We need an entrance that lands. Not just showing up. Something that turns heads. Isabel nodded. We arrived together. Same car. Public. Deliberate. And once we're inside? She stood, walked toward the window, the hem of her skirt brushing against her calves like whispering silk. "You stay close," she said, glancing back. We work the room slowly, like we're circling prey. There was something dangerous in the way she said it. Not vengeful, hungry. And despite myself, I felt that same hunger rise. Not just to expose them, but to undo them. To take back control, moment by moment, glance by glance. As we planned the night, step by step, I caught myself studying her more than I should. The way her jaw tightened when she mentioned Ethan. The softness that broke through when she laughed. She wasn't just some wounded wife out for blood. She was sharp, beautiful, and very much alive. When we finished outlining the final plan, she walked me to the elevator. "We don't rehearse the final act," she said quietly. "We just let it happen." The kiss. She looked up at me. I steady. "Yes. Let it be real." My pulse stuttered. "We don't have to force anything," I said, my voice lower now. She smiled. "I have no intention of forcing it." The elevator dinged. I stepped inside, the air between us charged, pulsing. As the doors closed, our eyes locked one last time. That night, lying in bed beside Alana, I barely noticed when she turned her back to me. I barely felt her breath against my shoulder. All I could think about was Isabel, and the kiss we weren't rehearsing. There's a kind of silence in a ballroom just before the chaos. It's not quiet, not really. It's a pressure, like the space between lightning and thunder. That's what it felt like when we stepped through the grand glass doors of the Metropolitan Event Hall. Me, in a midnight black tux, sharp and tailored. Isabel, in a backless emerald gown that shimmered like liquid envy. Every eye turned as we entered, not because we made a scene, but because we were the kind of couple people whispered about. Intentional. Beautiful. Just unfamiliar enough to be dangerous. I offered her my arm, and she took it with a quiet confidence that sent a pulse down my spine. I could feel the heat of her skin where her fingers pressed into mine. We weren't just pretending. We were becoming something real. The gala had just begun. High ceilings, chandeliers, classical strings blending into ambient house music. Ethan's company had spared no expense. The upper echelon of executives, board members, influencers, people who sold illusions for a living were all in attendance. And somewhere in that glittering ocean of power and deceit were the two people we were here for. We didn't look for them right away. We circled. Isabel led at first, guiding us with subtlety, her fingers never straying far from mine. She knew how to play this crowd, how to let herself be seen without seeming obvious. People greeted her with the kind of cautious awe they reserved for women who might know too much. We sipped champagne, smiled, whispered to each other like lovers sharing secrets no one else was allowed to hear. And then I saw her. Alana. She was across the room, dressed in a deep crimson gown, the one she'd bought 6 weeks ago, claiming it was just in case a big event came up. Her hair curled perfectly down one shoulder. Her eyes swept the room lazily until they landed on me. With Isabel, something in her face stuttered. Her lips parted. The glass in her hand dipped just slightly, just enough to betray her. She wasn't expecting this. Ethan appeared beside her moments later, whispering something to her with that insufferable smirk. His hand found her lower back. But when he followed her gaze, when he turned and saw me, he stopped talking. His face drained. I smiled, tipped my glass in their direction. "Ready?" I asked Isabel quietly. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the brush of her thigh through the fabric of her gown. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, fingers grazing the edge of my hairline. Then she kissed me. Not tentative, not gentle. This was a kiss meant to be remembered. It hit me like a wave, slow at first, then overwhelming. Her lips tasted like champagne and heat, her mouth opening just slightly to mine. I felt the tension break between us, months of frustration and betrayal melting into something fierce and raw. The entire room stilled. I didn't need to look. I could feel them watching, Alana, Ethan, everyone. Isabel pulled back slowly, her breath grazing my lips, her fingers still tracing my jawline. That, she whispered, was for them. My voice was rough. That felt like it was for us. She didn't answer, just smiled. I turned to look, and there they were. Alana's face was frozen in some mix of disbelief and fury. Ethan looked pale, like the blood had drained from him. His arm was still around her, but it hung awkwardly now. Dead weight. We didn't move toward them. We didn't need to. They began to drift toward us, slowly, like two satellites being pulled into orbit by a force they didn't understand. But before they could speak, Isabel turned to me and said, just loud enough, "Let's dance." And I followed her to the floor. The music swelled. A soft, jazzy cover of Wicked Game, echoed through the speakers. Isabel wrapped her arms around my shoulders, and I slid my hands to her waist. Our bodies fit too well, too easily. She leaned into my ear. Alana's going to explode. Ethan won't say a word, not here. But after this, I chuckled. After this, they'll know they've lost. Let them burn, she said. As the song ended, we let the crowd swallow us again. A few polite nods, a few whispers behind gloved fingers. I could feel the rumors starting already. And as we made our way toward the terrace, I finally looked over my shoulder and met Alana's eyes. They weren't angry. They were terrified. She knew. She knew I'd found her out. And now she had no idea what came next. The ballroom's ambient noise had returned to normal. At least for them. For us, for Alana, for Ethan, for Isabel and me, it felt like something seismic had just shifted beneath the marble floors. I felt it in every glance thrown our way, every whisper behind clutching champagne flutes. We didn't linger. We left just after the dance, our exit as controlled as our entrance. Let the mystery ferment. Let the fallout begin in private. The car ride home was a slow burn. Isabel sat beside me in the back seat, legs crossed, lips still tinted from our kiss. Her silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was calculated. She was savoring the effect, watching it ripple out in her mind like a stone through still water. When we reached her building, she touched my hand gently. Let me know how it goes, she said, then leaned in close, her breath warm against my cheek. Don't hold back. Not tonight. I watched her disappear into the elevator, still hearing the faint echo of her heels against the lobby tile. And then I went home. I found Alana waiting in the living room. Still in her red gown, shoes kicked off, glass of wine untouched on the table. Her makeup was smudged, not from tears, but from the way she'd probably paced, furious and spiraling. When I walked in, she didn't look at me right away. So, she said, voice low and brittle, that's what we're doing now. I tossed my jacket onto the arm of the chair, loosened my tie. Calm. Methodical. Doing what? I asked. She finally turned, eyes narrowed. Showing up at my company's biggest event with her. Kissing her. In front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you've done? I stared at her. You mean, like what you did with Ethan? That hit. Her posture faltered for a second. Her hand tightened around the stem of the glass. She tried to recover. That's not the same. No, I said, stepping closer. It's not. I didn't lie to you for months. I didn't sneak around, fuck my boss in hotels during lunch breaks, and pretend nothing was happening. Alana's face flushed. You went through my phone, didn't you? I laughed, low and bitter. You think this is about privacy? She crossed her arms. Defensive. Defiant. What? So you thought dating his wife was revenge, she snapped. That's pathetic. No, I said quietly. What's pathetic is how sloppy you got. You brought him into our house. Into our bed. Her face went white. You think I didn't notice? I continued. That I didn't see the change in your perfume, the lingerie you never wore for me, the nights you came home too satisfied to bother faking it? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I stepped closer. I saw the texts. The pictures. The calls at 2 a.m. You let him take you apart, Alana. Piece by piece. And then you came home and acted like nothing had happened. Tears welled in her eyes now. It didn't mean anything. That's worse, I said. You didn't even love him. You just needed to feel wanted. Powerful. Fucking alive. She turned away, wiping her eyes. I wanted you to notice, she whispered. To fight for me. To see me. I stared at the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the version of herself that shattered when I stopped playing the fool. Well, I said, voice sharp. You got your wish. She spun back. Isabel doesn't love you, you know. She's using you the same way you're using her. I didn't flinch. Maybe, I said. But that kiss? That kiss was real. And it broke you. For a moment, the room fell into silence. Then Alana crossed to me slowly, her eyes searching mine. So what now? She asked. You leaving me? I stepped back. I'm walking away from what we had, I said. From the woman who let it rot. Whether you're still in this house next week? That's your call. She stood there, stunned. And then I turned and walked upstairs. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just let the weight of truth crush the silence between us. It only took 48 hours for the story to spread. Someone at the gala had recorded our kiss. Not discreetly, either. A 10-second clip posted on Instagram under the caption, Wife's boss gets owned at gala. Watch the coldest power move ever. By Monday morning, it had over 300,000 views. By Tuesday, someone had leaked the names. Ethan Caldwell. Alana Pierce. Corporate affairs. Multiple. The company PR team scrambled. Executives issued bland statements about respecting privacy and conducting internal reviews. But behind closed doors, I knew the boardroom knives were out. I heard from a friend in finance that Ethan had been placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. Alana's face was pale when she got the call. She tried to act surprised, but I saw her hands tremble as she hung up the phone. She didn't speak to me that night. Not a word. Just sat in the living room like a ghost, staring at the silent TV. But I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about Isabel. We hadn't spoken since the gala. No messages. No cryptic texts or winks. I wasn't sure if it was strategy or distance. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked under that chandelier green dress shimmering like emerald fire, her mouth warm against mine. So when she finally messaged me Wednesday night, my heart punched my ribs. Isabel? Drinks? Me. Tell me when and where. She picked a small cocktail lounge tucked away on the west side. Quiet. Dim. The kind of place where people nurse secrets more than martinis. She was already there when I arrived, perched on a velvet bar stool, sipping something clear and elegant. You made the news, she said, without looking up. I slipped onto the stool beside her. So did you? She smirked. Ethan's lawyers tried to get me to sign an NDA yesterday. Said it was for the dignity of the family. I laughed in their faces. You going to divorce him? She turned to face me now, her eyes cool but not cold. I already started the paperwork. And you? I let out a breath. Not yet. But we haven't shared a room since the gala. She knows it's over. She just hasn't admitted it yet. The bartender dropped off my drink. I didn't touch it. I was too focused on the space between our knees, the slow warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with alcohol. Isabel leaned in, voice low. They thought they could lie to us. Cheat in secret. And now they're the ones unraveling. You think we're done unraveling? I asked. She tilted her head. You don't. I took a sip, savoring the burn. I don't know what we are now. That made her smile genuine this time. You know what we aren't, she said. We're not them. We left the bar together. No plan. No destination. Just the quiet tension of two people who had passed the point of no return and were still deciding whether to fall or jump. Outside, the night was warm for spring. She walked close beside me, her arm brushing mine occasionally, deliberate but unspoken. At the corner, she stopped. You want to come up? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached out and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. She closed her eyes briefly at the touch, then opened them again, looking straight into mine. I'm not ready for anything serious, I said. Her smile didn't fade. Who said anything about serious? We stood in silence, the kind that sizzles rather than soothes. Then I said, yeah, I want to come up. Her apartment was quiet. Clean. A little too perfect, except for the open bottle of wine already waiting on the kitchen counter. Like part of her had known. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The first kiss this time wasn't theatrical. It wasn't revenge. It was slow. Intentional. It started in the kitchen, her hand wrapped around my tie as she pulled me toward her. It continued down the hallway, trailing heat in our wake. Clothes came off, not in a rush, but like they were no longer necessary. Like we needed skin to understand what came next. And when she pulled me into her bed, everything else, Alana, Ethan, the past, burned away. What we had that night wasn't just sex. It was reclamation. We weren't just using each other to forget. We were remembering what it felt like to be seen again. Hours later, I lay beside her, sweat cooling on my skin, her head resting against my chest. She traced slow circles over my ribs with one finger. They thought they broke us. I kissed the top of her head. They just rewrote us. The morning after our night together, I woke before Isabel. Her arm was draped across my stomach, her breath warm against my chest, the sheets tangled in a way that spoke to how little sleep we'd actually gotten. For a few seconds, I just watched her. This wasn't like waking up next to Alana, rigid and scheduled, already halfway to her inbox by the time the sun rose. Isabel slept like someone who had nothing to prove. And maybe for the first time in a long time, neither did I. But real life, like rot, finds its way back in. The first sign came in the form of an email I opened later that day. Subject line, termination of vendor contract, urgent. It was from one of the smaller arms of Ethan's company, the same company I had 2 consulting deals with, both 6-figure contracts, both previously untouched by his private life. The message was cold. Legal. Reevaluating partnerships during transitional leadership. Translation. We're cutting ties because you embarrassed us. I sat at my desk for almost a full hour just staring at the screen. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just hollow. I'd known there'd be consequences. I just didn't think they'd start with my livelihood. The second hit came that evening in the form of a text from Alana. Alana, we need to talk. Please. Just 10 minutes. I almost ignored it. But curiosity habit, maybe, got the better of me. When I got home, she was waiting in the kitchen, still in work clothes, her hair pulled back too tight. A mug of untouched tea sat in front of her like a prop. I saw your bank statements, she said without preamble. They pulled 2 of your contracts. Not your concern, I replied, brushing past her. She stood. I didn't mean for this to happen. No, I said, turning back to her. You just meant to fuck your boss in hotel rooms while your husband funded your gym membership and thought your orgasms were his. Her face tightened. I made a mistake. No, Alana. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You made choices. Over and over. She swallowed. Her voice softened. It didn't mean anything. You keep saying that, I said. Like if you say it enough, it'll erase the nights you gave him what I thought was mine. She looked down, ashamed for once. Then, I've ended it with him. He's out of the company. Isabel's divorcing him. I nodded slowly. And now what? You want to go back? Hit reset like it never happened. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. I don't want to lose you. You lost me the minute I realized you were never mine to begin with. She stepped toward me, hesitant. Can't we try? At least therapy. Alana, I said quietly. I slept with Isabel. Her breath caught. That brittle composure she wore cracked. You what? After the gala. And again since. Was this your plan the whole time? She whispered. To hurt me back? I held her gaze. No, that was just a bonus. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just left the room. And for once, I didn't follow. 2 days later, Isabel and I met again, this time over dinner, the kind where the wine was better than the food, and the conversation had sharp edges. I lost 2 contracts, I said, stirring my glass. She sighed. You'll bounce back. Easy for you to say. Your family has 3 generations of safety nets. She didn't flinch. Is that what you think this is? A game of class warfare? I shook my head. No, I just didn't expect to care so much. She reached across the table and took my hand. There's something you should know, she said. About the divorce. I tensed. I have a son, she continued. He's 9. He's been living with my parents while I finalize everything. Ethan's lawyers are already making threats about custody, trying to paint me as unstable. Vindictive. My stomach dropped. You never mentioned a kid. I didn't want to. I didn't want to use that. Not with you. But you might have to, I said slowly. If this goes to court, your relationship with me, it could hurt your case. She nodded. So what are you saying? I asked. I'm saying if you need to walk away now, I'll understand. I stared at her for a long time. At the woman who matched me move for move, flame for flame, and now, for the first time, looked afraid. I'm not walking, I said. Even if it costs you more? I leaned in. I've already paid in blood. Might as well get something real for the price. She smiled. But there was fear behind it. Not of me. Of the world creeping in. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Not thinking of Alana. Not thinking of the contracts. But wondering what now. Because revenge had always been simple. But love? Love was messy. And very, very real. The courtroom smelled like old wood, stale coffee, and the slow decay of once passionate marriages. Divorce court doesn't hum with drama the way movies make it seem. It's colder, quieter. Pain is whispered here, not shouted. It's passed in legal briefs and dry testimonies, while lives unravel in suits and pencil skirts. I sat beside my attorney, watching Alana from across the room. She wore a navy dress, simple and neat, her hair tucked behind her ears like she wanted to look smaller. Less guilty, maybe even innocent. She didn't look at me. Not once. The weeks since Isabel and I had become public, first among our circles, then in online whispers, had sharpened something in Alana. She wasn't pleading anymore. She wasn't furious either. She was deflated. Like the version of herself she'd crafted over the years had finally collapsed under its own hypocrisy. She didn't contest the terms. No battle over assets. No desperate claims about reconciliation. But the custody hearing for Isabel and Ethan? That was a different storm. Ethan tried to play the victim. He arrived in a pressed gray suit, fake humility stitched into every gesture. He called Isabel volatile in his deposition, accused her of using their son as leverage, and then tried to pivot the court's attention to me. He's living with a man she barely knows, Ethan said under oath, voice just the right blend of wounded and noble. That's not stability. I was in the back row when he said it, jaw tight, fist clenched under the bench. But Isabel didn't flinch. Her lawyer calmly presented evidence, months of Ethan's absence, his financial evasions, his countless overnight stays logged during the affair. But it wasn't the evidence that won. It was Isabel. She took the stand and looked every person in the eye. Her voice never shook. She spoke about love, about parenting, about how betrayal didn't make her unfit, it made her human, and how being human made her a better mother, not a worse one. At one point, she looked directly at Ethan. You don't get to break this family and then pretend to mourn it, she said. The judge gave her full custody that afternoon. When it was over, I waited for her outside the courthouse. She came down the stone steps slowly, her heels clicking with each step, sunglasses hiding the exhaustion in her face. I held out a coffee. Didn't know if you'd want to see me. She took the cup, sipping without speaking. Then, I needed you there. Even if you didn't. We didn't kiss. Not in that moment. That wasn't what the day was about. That night, I went back home for the last time. The house was already half empty. Alana's things had been packed into neat boxes along the wall. The air smelled like cardboard and lemon cleaner. She stood in the kitchen, turning a ring over in her fingers. I signed, she said quietly. You'll have the final papers tomorrow. I nodded. Thank you. She looked at me then, really looked, for the first time in weeks. I never thought it would end like this. I did, I replied. The moment you stopped seeing me. She closed her eyes, took a breath. I was selfish. No, I said. You were lost. There's a difference. She stared at me, and for a moment, the weight of what we used to be hovered between us. I hope she's good to you, she said finally. Isabel. She already is. A pause. And you? She asked. Do you still hate me? I considered that. No, I said. But I don't love you either. And that's what matters now. Alana nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. I walked out without looking back. The next day, I met Isabel on a park bench downtown, her son playing with a soccer ball nearby. He looks like you, I said, watching the boy laugh as he chased the ball across the grass. She smiled, bittersweet. He's stronger than I ever was. And what about you now? She looked at me. Ask me again in a few months. When we're not bleeding from the same wounds. I took her hand anyway. Held it. Said nothing. Because sometimes closure isn't a clean ending. Sometimes it's a quiet moment in a park, next to someone who sees you, not as who you were, but who you're becoming. 6 months later, everything felt quieter. Not simpler, not easier, but quieter. Like the world had finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. I'd moved into a smaller place across the river. Exposed brick, tall windows, no unnecessary space, just enough for one man and the life he was rebuilding. It smelled like coffee and wood polish, and for the first time in years, no one else's perfume lingered in the hallways. The divorce was finalized in early August. Alana didn't come to the hearing. Her lawyer submitted the last signatures. No fight. No pleading. Just a silence that felt like an apology she couldn't say out loud. I got the house. She moved in with her sister across town. We shared no assets, no debts, no children. Only a history that lived in photographs now buried in a drawer I never opened. Isabel's life had shifted too. She and her son had settled into a quiet rhythm. She kept things low-key, playdates, school pickups, work from home while custody arrangements were finalized. Ethan had tried a few more legal maneuvers, but the judge saw right through them. When he realized he was losing, he disappeared into the arms of whatever came next. Neither of us missed them. But healing wasn't instant, and we never pretended it was. We saw each other. Slowly. No declarations. No pressure. Just presence. Dinner once a week. Drinks on rainy Fridays. Walks through the park where we let our conversations wander into territory untouched by betrayal. Sometimes we kissed. Sometimes we didn't. But every time, we chose to be there. It was a Tuesday night in late September when it all came together. She invited me over, her son at a friend's house for a sleepover. I brought wine. She made pasta, barefoot in a long white shirt that may have once belonged to Ethan, but looked nothing like his anymore. We ate by the window. A soft breeze tugged at the curtains. City lights blinked beyond the balcony like they were winking just for us. You still thinking about going back to consulting? She asked as she refilled my glass. Maybe, I said. I've had offers. But I'm thinking smaller these days. Cleaner. Projects that don't make me feel like I'm selling my soul. She smirked. You always were a little too honest for that world. And what about you? I asked. Still battling the PTO moms and board meetings? She rolled her eyes. You have no idea. One of them tried to shame me for bringing store-bought cupcakes to the bake sale. I laughed. Monsters. She stood then, walked to the window, and pulled it open. The city noise swept in, soft horns, faint music, a siren far off. Come here, she said. I joined her, standing beside her at the edge of the balcony. She leaned her head on my shoulder. No theatrics. No performance. Just a woman finally letting herself rest. Do you remember, she said softly, the night we first met? The cafe. Of course. You looked so calm. Like nothing could touch you. I was anything but calm, I admitted. I'd never felt rage and desire in the same moment until I saw you. She smiled. And now, I said, turning to face her, I just feel lucky. She looked up at me, the city reflecting in her eyes. I kissed her then. Not like at the gala. Not for show. This one was quiet. Unrushed. Deep. When we pulled apart, she didn't speak right away. Then she said, this isn't revenge anymore. No, I agreed. This is something else. She took my hand and led me back inside. There was no urgency as she undressed me. No rage left to burn. Just touch. Familiar. Earned. We made love like people who had nothing to prove and everything to feel. Her breath against my skin felt like closure. Her body under mine felt like a beginning. Later, tangled in sheets that smelled like jasmine and sweat, she whispered, You're not what I expected. I smiled into her neck. Neither are you. We didn't say I love you. Not yet. But we didn't have to. That kiss months ago had torn the old world apart. This one built a new one. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was home.